Hey guys, and welcome back to another lesson. Today I'd like to talk to you about trying to emulate the sort of style that Joe Hisaishi is known for. And in case you haven't heard his name, he is sort of the house composer for many of the Studio Ghibli films. So this is the Japanese animation studio headed by Hayao Miyazaki, who is responsible for many of Japan's great animation films over the last probably few decades. And Joe Hisaishi has a very sort of distinct style. He has a very wide repertoire, but he has a kind of a distinct style when writing for piano, and he uses these very open, airy sounding chords in many of his compositions. And what I'd like to cover today are some ideas behind building these sort of chords and stringing them together. Obviously, it's impossible to really emulate or give a breakdown of his style in a YouTube video, but I'll do my best and we'll see how much of it actually translates over to you. Okay, so the first concept I'd like to present is a very simple one. A lot of times when Joe Hisaishi plays a chord, he rolls the notes. So for example, if he plays something like this, he doesn't just hit the notes, but he rolls them out. So just a little something to pay attention to. Now, the second thing has to do with the type of chords he uses. And his chords are very open, and they don't have a definitive major or minor sound to them always. Now, underlying this is the use of a particular interval known as a fourth. Now, let me start by showing you, for example, a succession of 3 notes, and the distance between each of these notes, an E, an A, and a D, is what's known as a fourth. So a fourth is known as a musical interval, which is made out of 5 semitones, and if I count between these notes, then I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So each of these 2 notes is a fourth apart. Now, playing notes in fourths create this sort of ambiguous harmonic feel. And this is the underlying basis for a lot of Hisaishi's kind of characteristic sound. Now, it's important to learn to play these fourths all over the keyboard. And there are only 12 different notes, so you'll have to learn 12 different forms. So for example, let's take this thing here. Start from an F sharp, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then again 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you have here these 3 notes which are a fourth apart from each. Now once you master this, the second thing you can do is string these groups of fourths together in the right and left hand. So I can play 3 notes which are fourth apart each in the right hand, And I can play the same thing in my left hand. So I can try different combinations. You get all of these interesting different sounds. I like to point out 3 particular combinations which kind of sound better, so to speak, than others. Of course, in art there's no such thing as better or worse, but so I might say less dissonant. And these 3 combinations, 3 options in the left hand are, again, groups of fourths which are built on one of these 3 different notes, on the E, A, or D. So for example, I can build a group of fourths on E in the left hand and play them together, and actually I get the same group in the right hand and in the left hand. E, A, D, E, A, D. Now let me build these fourths on the A. So A, D, and G in the left hand, and the same E, A, D in the right hand. And I get this sort of sound. And finally, the last combination I'd like to point out is the one built on D. So I start with a D, I go up a perfect fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here's my left hand voicing, and played together, it sounds like this. I could go into theory and try to explain why this works. I think I'm just going to mostly let you explore this on your own. Of course, these are not the only 3 combinations that make sense. You can, do something like this. It sounds more dissonant, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. In the right context, it might make sense. Okay, the next thing I'd like to show you is, or use, is what's called sus2 and sus4 chords. And to motivate them, let me start by this voicing in fourths in my right hand. And I'm going to take this C, so I'm starting with a D, G, and a C. And I'm going to take this C down an octave. So it's kind of like an inversion if you've seen these sort of things. But if you haven't, don't worry about it. So I'm playing the same group of notes, but the intervals between them have changed. Now these 2 notes are not a fourth apart, they're actually a major second apart. So there's 2 semitones apart. And this chord is called a C sus2 chord. Similarly, if I start from the same voicing in fourths, and I take this lower note, D, up an octave, I get what's called a sus4 chord, or more specifically in this case, a G sus4. Sus stands for sustained. Again, because this chord is neither minor nor major. It's sustaining in anticipation of a resolution to either a minor or a major. So for example, in old church music, you might hear something like this. So this would be a resolution from a sus, a G sus4 chord, to a G major chord. But these sus chords, sus2 or sus4, are interesting in their own right, again, because they do not commit to either a minor or a major characteristic. And you can combine them again in the right hand and in the left hand. So for example, I can play a C sus2 in the right hand. Then I can play a D sus2 in the left hand. And I get this sort of sound, which is kind of interesting. I can play, this is a C sus4 chord. And let's say I play a C sus2 in the right hand. Again, an interesting sort of sound. So I'm just moving it around, transposing it across the keyboard. So this again opens up the kind of possibility of building these interesting, spacious sounding chords. And really, once you find like one of them, like this combination, C sus4 and C sus2, you can try moving them around the keyboard. And they already create this sort of spacious, airy, kind of very distinct Joe Hisaishi signature sound. Now, let me show you one more thing. We've talked about fourths until now. Let's take this interval here. These two notes, a C and an F, are a fourth apart. So if I take the C and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I get up to an F. But now let me take this F and move it down an octave. This is what's called a fifth. And a fifth is an interval which is 7 semitones apart, and I can again prove it to you, so to speak. I can start with my C and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, this means that fifths are kind of as ambiguous as fourths. Now I can do the same thing, starting, let's say, starting from this group of fourths, C, F, and B flat. I can take this C and move it up an octave here. And I can take this B flat and move it down an octave here. So I get a B flat to an F to a C. The same three notes, but now if you'll pay attention, you'll see that these two notes are a fifth apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And these two notes are a fifth apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is another kind of very ambiguous sounding voicing that is very open sounding and very pleasing, I think, to the ear. And again, what you can do is you can string groups of fifths in the left hand with groups of fifths in the right hand. And this is really a classic Joe Hisaishi sound. So I have here F, C, and G, and here I have A, E, and B. If you know theory, you can try to sort of play a game with yourself and guess, does this describe an actual chord, like a major seventh or a minor seventh or a dominant seventh or a major ninth or something? So it's a nice game to play. But I think the really nice thing about it is that you don't need to know a lot of theory to just play around with these groups of fifths. Right? Let's try another group. Let's try this. So you see, this is kind of, again, a very open sound that is made out of a group of fifths in the left hand and a group of fifths in the right hand. And of course you can mix and match, so you can have fifths in the left hand and fourths in the right hand. Another characteristic or kind of trick that is used in a lot of these pieces is, again, trying to play chords which are spacious, so the distance between the notes is large. Large meaning fourths, fifths, and stuff like that. So, for example, when I played the introduction piece, I played a chord that looked like this. Now, there are actually a couple of ways you can think about this. I prefer to think about this as a minor chord. Or in this particular instance, this is a B minor 11th chord. Again, if you haven't encountered 11th chords or minor chords, don't worry about it too much. The cool thing is, again, you can learn this particular group of notes, and I'll go over it in just a second, and then you can transpose it over the keyboard. All of these chords have been really transpositions of this basic form here. So once you learn to move it around, you can get this, you can get these very, very, I think, in my opinion, pleasing sounding cascades of chords, which you can then play around with. So let's start by breaking this down. You're playing 3 notes in the left hand, 3 notes in the right hand. And in the left hand, I'm playing an F sharp, a C sharp, and a D. And then in the right hand, I'm playing an E, A, and E. So you'll notice that, except for this cluster of notes here, by the way, a lot of these notes are either a 4th or a 5th apart. So for example, these 2 notes, F sharp and C sharp, are a 5th apart, and E and A are a 4th apart, and A and E are a 5th apart. And again, you have 12 different notes, and you can practice moving this shape around the keyboard. So that's it for now. I've laid out some ideas that you can play with, and I hope they've been helpful and that you've learned something interesting, and I'll see you next time.